to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely critical nursing interventions required for 4 major pediatric blood disorders. When you're standing at the bedside of a child whose very blood is working against them, you know you need to know exactly how to respond. So we're going to look closely at the underlying pathophysiology of these conditions and, more importantly, translate that directly into actionable, life-saving clinical care.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering the pediatric curriculum, iron deficiency, beta thalassemia, sickle cell, and finally, aplastic anemia.
Section 1. The Pediatric Curriculum. Let's take a look at the exact academic standards we're tackling. Looking at the guidelines, our mandate is pretty huge. We're covering the entire nursing, pharmacological, and medical management of anemia, thalassemia, sickle cell, and aplastic anemia. And we aren't just looking at definitions here. We're diving deep into the holistic care, rehabilitation, and the specific clinical interventions required for each and every one of these conditions.
Moving on to Section 2, Iron Deficiency, specifically the classic milk anemia case.
Let's see how a super common toddler habit creates a profound clinical problem. Picture this. A 22-month-old toddler comes into the clinic. Mama's praising him, saying he's an incredibly good sleeper, like 12 hours a night. But she mentions he gets winded really easily just playing with his siblings. Well, when we dig into his diet, the culprit becomes super obvious. He's drinking up to 40 ounces of whole cow's milk daily from a sippy cup. He's effectively giving himself a perpetual toddler milk hangover and completely refusing solid meats and veggies. On exam, he's got mucosal pallor and a mild systolic murmur. Guys, this is a textbook presentation of milk anemia. Cow's milk is a remarkably poor source of iron, and when kids drink it in massive quantities, it literally just crowds out the iron-rich solid foods they actually need to build hemoglobin.
Now here's where it gets really fascinating. Severe microcytic hypochromic anemia, which is when the red blood cells get abnormally small and pale, can trigger some highly unusual physiological cravings. We call it pica. Kids with severe chronic iron depletion might literally start eating dirt, clay, cardboard, or ice. It's wild, right? But it's actually an extraordinary distress signal from a body that is starving for the basic building blocks of red blood cells.
So his hemoglobin is sitting at a really alarming 7.2 grams per deciliter. Because of this, our primary nursing goal shifts immediately to aggressive iron supplementation. Hemoglobin absolutely needs iron to be synthesized. Without it, oxygen simply isn't making it to his tissues efficiently. Hence, the total exhaustion and that murmur we heard.
So, what's our move? The absolutely crucial point here is teaching parents the strict administrative rules for oral ferrous sulfate. You have to give iron between meals to get maximum absorption. You do give it with citrus juice because vitamin C creates an acidic environment in the gut that significantly boosts absorption. But you absolutely do not give iron with milk or antacids. Calcium binds directly to the iron and severely restricts absorption. Oh, and here's a pro-bedside tip. Always use a syringe or dropper and place it well back in the mouth to bypass the teeth. This prevents temporary but scary-looking green-black staining.
Ensuring parents understand the big picture is vital. You've got to tell them to limit the child's cow's milk intake to a maximum of 16 to 24 ounces a day. This naturally brings back their appetite for iron-rich solids. And here's a massive point of parental anxiety you can easily prevent. Warn them that the child's stool is going to turn dark green or tarry black. Parents will totally panic if they aren't warned, but you just explain that this is a completely benign, expected finding. In fact, it actually proves the treatment is working.
Okay, Section 3. Beta thalassemia and the massive issue of iron overload.
This is a fascinating but really tragic inherited disorder. It's almost like a cruel catch-22, where the body's attempt to fix severe anemia creates an entirely new set of lethal problems. Because these patients genetically lack the beta-globin chain, they produce unstable, fragile red blood cells that are rapidly destroyed. The body tries to compensate by hyperactively ramping up bone marrow production, which actually causes cranial skeletal changes, like frontal bossing. To keep the child alive and suppress this overactive marrow, we have to administer packed red blood cell transfusions every 3 to 4 weeks. But here's the catch. The human body has 0 natural mechanisms to excrete the massive amounts of iron introduced by lifelong transfusions. So it inevitably loads the body with excess iron, causing a condition called hemosiderosis.
To put this into perspective, imagine a 5-year-old girl coming in for her scheduled transfusion. Her serum ferritin level is at a shocking 2,400 nanograms per milliliter. This excess iron doesn't just float around safely, It deposits directly into the major organs, putting her at massive risk for cardiac failure and hepatic fibrosis.
Your top priority here, aside from safely administering the transfusions of course, is vigilantly managing that iron overload through chelation therapy. Medications like deferrisoxamine or deferricirox actually chemically bind to the excess iron, so it can be excreted in urine or feces. Ensuring strict adherence to this therapy is non-negotiable for their long-term survival. Plus, you have to continually monitor the trial for left upper quadrant abdominal pain. The spleen is working overtime to clear those fragile red blood cells, which leads to profound splenomegaly, and any abdominal pain could indicate a dangerous splenic enlargement or worse, a rupture.
All right, Section 4, Sickle Cell Anemia, and a true lifesaver known as the H.O.P framework.
Sickle cell is just an incredibly painful disease, driven by an autosomal recessive genetic defect. Normal hemoglobin gets replaced by abnormal sickle hemoglobin, and it changes everything about how blood flows. Think about an 8-year-old boy admitted to the ED. He's in the middle of an acute vaso-occlusive crisis, suffering agonizing 9 out of 10 pain in his spine and thighs. So what triggered this? He had a mild viral infection and just stopped drinking fluids. Triggered by that infection and dehydration, his red blood cells literally crystallized into rigid crescent-shaped rods. These sickled cells clumped together, drastically increasing blood viscosity and essentially blocking capillaries all over his body, causing profound tissue ischemia and infarction.
This is exactly where the H.O.P framework comes in. It's a specific nursing response you absolutely must memorize. Step 1 is H for hydration. You've got to start aggressive IV fluids at 1.5 to 2 times the maintenance rate. This promotes massive hemodilution to literally untangle those clotted microvessels and get the blood flowing again. O is for oxygenation, but pay close attention here. You only provide oxygen if the SpO2 is below 92%. Oxygen won't reverse cells that have already sickled. P is for pain management. You must use scheduled, around-the-clock parenteral opioids, like IV morphine. Never use PRN or as-needed dosing. You have to stay ahead of this excruciating ischemic pain.
Now listen up, because this is a massive nursing trap when it comes to comfort measures. Applying an ice pack to a swollen, painful joint might seem super intuitive, right? But doing so will rapidly worsen the crisis. Cold causes vasoconstriction, which clamps down the blood vessels and traps even more sickled cells, just exacerbating the ischemia. You must use warm compresses to promote vasodilation and soothe the pain. Never, ever use cold. And one absolutely crucial pharmacological rule for pediatric sickle cell patients: stick to morphine or hydromorphone. You must completely avoid mepridine, which is commonly known as Demerol. In kids, the metabolites of Demerol accumulate really rapidly and can trigger severe central nervous system excitation and life-threatening seizures. Keep that in mind.
Finally, Section 5, Aplastic Anemia and the reality of severe isolation.
This condition is truly terrifying. The body's bone marrow factory just shuts down entirely. The normal blood-producing cellular architecture gets wiped out and replaced largely by inactive fat tissue. Because of this shutdown, patients develop pancytopenia. Basically, it's a simultaneous deficiency across the board. Without red blood cells, they have severe anemia and fatigue. Without platelets, they develop thrombocytopenia, leading to unprovoked bleeding and epistaxis. And without white blood cells, specifically neutrophils, they develop granulocytopenia, making them highly vulnerable to opportunistic infections.
Take our 7-year-old clinical case, for example. She comes in with extreme bruising. Her platelets are critically low at 11,000 cells per microliter, and her absolute neutrophil count, or ANC, is just 250. To put that in perspective, an ANC that low means her immune system is functionally non-existent. Even the tiniest bump could cause a fatal internal hemorrhage, and a common everyday germ could trigger rapid sepsis.
When a child's body cannot defend itself, we, the nurses, have to become the shield. You have to implement ironclad neutropenic and bleeding precautions. We're talking placing her in a private room with positive pressure ventilation. You have to ban all fresh flowers, raw fruits, or unpasteurized products from the room because they can harbor bacteria. To prevent bleeding, there are absolutely no intramuscular injections or rectal temperatures allowed. Any unavoidable venipuncture requires a minimum of 10 minutes of direct, heavy manual pressure. We even go so far as replacing her toothbrush with ultra-soft foam oral swabs to protect her friable mucous membranes until a stem cell transplant or immunosuppressive therapy can actually kick in.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really think about this.
The immense responsibility and sharp critical thinking required to manage these fragile pediatric lives is huge. From catching a toddler's excessive milk intake early, to orchestrating complex hemodilution in a sickle cell crisis, or managing the profound isolation of an aplastic bone marrow, the nursing interventions you deploy are literally the barrier between a catastrophic complication and a chance at healing. Are you ready to be that ultimate line of defense? Keep studying, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.